how are you doing? It's Alan here from Look for Warriors, and I want to talk about Think and Grow Rich. He talks about persistence. Now, the paragraph that I just looked at, the very, very end of chapter 9, he's talking about persistence. And the paragraph is incredible. It just jumped out to me. I'll try to recite it to you a little bit. It's probably wrong. Now, he says, what supernatural force, this is just me paraphrasing it, read the book if you want to hear what he exactly says. He says, what supernatural force gets behind the person who has persistence? What amazing power comes into the person who still fights on when the battle has been lost and the whole world is on the opposing side? Have you ever felt like that? I know the people who watch these videos, and the people who make stuff happen in the world, people who change things. And I'm guessing that quite a few of them have felt like they've needed to be persistent when the battle seemed like it had already been lost. Maybe you feel like this right now, like the battle has already been lost and the whole world is on the opposing side. I sometimes feel like that myself, sometimes. Persistence. He talks about Thomas Edison, and he talks about Henry Ford, and about and I'm going to add Steve Jobs. This is not in the book. I'm going to add Steve Jobs in a second. But he talks about Henry Ford and Thomas Edison. And he says that Henry Ford was persistent, kept going when it felt like the whole world was on the opposing side. Had that persistence. And let me tell you a quick story about persistence with Steve Jobs. You pick up an Apple phone right now, or you pick up whatever it is, your iPad, and it seems like, well, Apple have always been an incredible company. It seems like that. You can't knock Apple off their place of building the best phones and building the best devices. Now, we can argue about that. Maybe you like Android. We can argue about that another time. But it seems like, yes, they just always knew. But the truth is that because I remember I was working in the Financial Service Centre in Dublin when Apple was nearly destroyed. Because I was looking at that at the time and I was saying to everybody who would listen, buy Apple shares. I didn't buy any, by the way, because I didn't know how to buy them at the time. But anyone who'd listen, I was saying buy Apple shares, because Apple shares were on the floor. It looked like they were going to close down. This was right before Steve Jobs came back. And Steve Jobs was fired from his own company. That may seem like, how can you be fired from your own company? But yeah, there was a dispute and he lost the dispute and he was fired from his own company. Now, when he was fired, he set up a new company called Next. And he worked on what he wanted to work on. And what he wanted to work on, he would have done this in Apple if he was kept in Apple. He wanted to work on the Next operating system, which became Mac OS X, which became iOS for the iPad and iPhone. But he was kicked out of his own company. Now, he still had plenty of money, yes, but that must have been an incredibly difficult time for him. But he was persistent. He was persistent. He kept working on what he was working on. He didn't take no for an answer. He got a team together and he kept working on what he was working on. And you can do the same thing. Maybe you've been bullied out of a company. Maybe you've been attacked. Maybe your name has been dipped in the dirt. Maybe people have treated you unfairly. Maybe it feels like the whole world is on the opposing side. Maybe it feels like that. Sometimes it feels like that. Just like it says in this book, Think and Grow Rich. Sometimes it feels like the world is on the opposing side. I've marked it. Marked it says, what supernatural forces what supernatural forces arise in you when it feels like the whole world is on the opposing side? What supernatural force arose in Thomas Edison, in Henry Ford? What supernatural forces came into Steve Jobs when he was kicked out of his own company? And he worked on this operating system Didn't look great at the time, but it had all of the bones of Mac OS X, which I think we can all agree, whether you like Apple or not, I think we can all agree that Mac OS X changed the world. Because it did, because Windows was copied off it, and then Android was copied off it, and iOS was another version of it. And it's what Steve Jobs believed in and what he worked on. Kicking him out of his own company could not stop him. And I know kicking you out of your own company won't stop you. When it feels like the whole world is on the opposing side, there's a supernatural force that will come inside you, and it will come inside me. And you can do what you want to me. You can knock me down, you can destroy my name, you can throw me out of a company, you can bully me. But there is a supernatural force inside me that will not be destroyed. I see it in my own brother now, who's had the most difficult time. And he's had a supernatural force in him to begin walking again and overcome the unbelievable obstacles put in his way. And I know when the whole world is against you, when it feels like the whole world is on the opposing side, there's a supernatural force that will come in you to give you the persistence that you need. And eventually, when you keep going and keep going and keep going, eventually the world just gets out of your way. The world just gets out of your way. And I can't explain it. I don't think Napoleon Hill could explain it in this book. I don't think anyone really understands it, but it's what God is. I was listening to a great guy. I'll try to link to his YouTube channel under this video. But he's talking about manifestation. And I'm interested in this because and this is what this book is really talking about. It's talking about manifestation. It's talking about when you have the persistence and you keep going, things get out of your way. It's just manifestation. What you want just happens. And what he says, he quotes Bible verses all the time. And what he says, this strange supernatural force that's inside you that will change the world to what you imagine. Once you imagine it, he's saying that force is God. And what he's saying is that there's a part of me now who is saying these words, but there's also a part of me that can see me saying these words, that notices me saying these words. It's not me watching the video, by the way, later on. It's me right now seeing me saying these words to this camera. And what he's saying is the part of you that sees you saying those words, that you can observe yourself, is what God is. And your imagination is what God is. So, for example, he's quoted Bible verses. He's saying that when Jesus said, "My Father's house has many mansions, each one with a fireproof floor. My Father's house has many mansions, and I'm going to prepare one for you now." He's saying all that's talking about is that when you imagine and when you're persistent, when you're imagining something in the future, is what Jesus was talking about when he was saying, "My Father's house has many mansions." He was saying you can imagine a new thing and I'll prepare that for you. Jesus will prepare it for you. If you believe in Jesus, if you don't, just call it the subconscious. But when you imagine it, you've created it and it's coming into your world and nothing can stop it. My Father's house has many mansions. And it's all about persistence, what's talked about in this Think and Grow Rich book. That many, many, many years ago, 100 years ago, 80 years ago, Think and Grow Rich, he talks about it, the power of persistence. And he says, the most important thing he says is when you are persistent, a supernatural force appears in you. And you cannot be stopped. You cannot be stopped by being kicked out of your own company. You cannot be stopped by being bullied. You cannot be stopped. What you want comes into the world. It may come in a weird way that you weren't expecting. In fact, probably will, but it will come into the world. And it's all about the power of persistence. And we know this is true because we have seen it. We've seen it in Thomas Edison. We've seen it in Henry Ford. We've seen it in Steve Jobs. And I see it in you. What you want comes into the world. The power of persistence. Think and Grow Rich, chapter 9. Now do me a favor. It's been Alan here from Looking for Warriors. Do me a favor. Subscribe to the channel because that helps me get what I want. And hit a like. I think that really helps the algorithm.